Hello and welcome. This is my complete draft guide for the Arena Powered Cube coming to Arena on Tuesday. This guide will be great for anyone on Arena that is new to cubes of this power level, or anyone like myself who plays a lot of Vintage Cube on Magic the Gathering Online that is interested in what the differences are between Magic Online and the Arena Powered Cube. This guide will go over strategies of each of the colors, both their main and sub strategies, different combos to be looking out for, as well as more general guidance on power level, how many lands to play, different ways to be aggro versus combo versus control. All that will be covered in this video. So we're just going to jump right into it. So the Arena Powered Cube is going to be 540 cards, which is notable because in any given cube pool, there are only going to be 360 cards seen per draft, which is 3 15-card packs for each of the 8 people. So each individual pod is only going to see 2/3 of the cards. This means that if you're building an all-in combo deck, let's say Flash, for example, if you draft all of the big creatures before you see Flash, there's a chance that that card simply will not be in the pool. So this is just a very important thing to keep in mind while drafting. Moving on to lands. I thought a long time about this, and I recommend playing between 15.5 and 16.5 lands, which is a little interesting, but let me explain. So I threw up on here some different counts for cards that aren't lands that I count as lands. So Dark Depths does not count as a land, it doesn't tap for mana. Even if you have Yavimaya and can make it tap for green, that's not reliable. Do not count Dark Depths as a land. Mana Dorks, Dark Ritual, Lotus Petal, and Grim Monolith I count as a quarter of a land. If you have one or two of these, mainly with Mana Dorks. If you're stacking 6 Mana Dorks, okay, that counts as a land and a half, The quote-unquote bad Moxen and Mana Vault I count as half a land, and then the good Moxen, Black Lotus, Mana Crypt, and Soul Ring all count as a land. Now, instead of playing the normal 16 to 17 lands, which is usually the recommendation for any normal draft, Powered Cube has a much lower curve, so you should be playing a fewer lands just naturally. But also, if you're coming over from MTGO, Magic the Gathering Arena has a land smoother. You actually, behind the scenes, draw 2 hands, and it gives you one with a couple more lands in it. That's a huge oversimplification, but you can be a little bit more greedy on lands because of it. So I'd recommend, I will be playing most of my games with 16 using this model as well. So if I happen to draft a Soul Ring and a Chrome Mox, I'll be registering 14 lands. That'll end up being 15.5, which I will be happy with. So that is my recommendation for lands. So now I'm going to move forward into just what are the best cards to draft, and it should be no surprise to anyone. The best card is Black Lotus, followed by Mana Crypt, followed by Soul Ring. If all of these cards are in your pack, this is the order I would recommend taking them in, unless you are playing an all-in artifact deck. If you're doing artifact combo things, Mana Crypt is probably a little higher than Black Lotus, but this is just the general rule of thumb. It should not be a surprise to anyone. Moving forward to the Moxen, all 5 Moxen are in this cube. They are all great and all worth taking, but if you see multiple Moxen in a pack, I value Sapphire and Jet above Pearl and Ruby, and all of them above Mox Emerald. Jet and Sapphire. Sapphire lets you do artifact things in blue. Jet lets you cast reanimate spells faster, also lets you do the discard spells faster. Ruby and Pearl, white and red are both kind of the aggro strategies, so they just accelerate you beating down with creatures. And then Mox Emerald is in green, which is mainly lands and has a lot of Mana Dorks, so it's the most replaceable in its colors. So, interestingly, compared to Magic Vintage Cube, white and red don't have tons of artifact support, whereas in Magic Online Vintage Cube, they're kind of the off colors for if you're building an artifact deck. That's not really the case, so Pearl and Ruby go down a little bit in value because of that. So this is my ranking comparing them to each other, but they're all great and you should take them above anything other than the cards talked about on the previous slide. So now we're just going to run down each of the colors. All of the colors have a main theme, a sub theme, and then there's a couple more themes I'm going to talk about, cards to look out for, and different draft strategies to go. So starting with so there's actually two more mocks I forgot to cover, Chrome Mox and Mox Diamond. Both of these, again, I would take over pretty much any other card in the cube other than the ones we've already talked about. In my opinion, Mox Diamond is better than Chrome Mox. Mox Diamond puts a land in your graveyard, and there are land graveyard themes going on. And then Chrome Mox always has you go down a card and can only tap for the colors of the card that you went down. So Mox Diamond is better in my opinion. Both of these are great to accelerate you. Acceleration is super important in Vintage and Powered Cube. So take both of these highly. I prefer Diamond to Chrome Mox. So now we'll be jumping into white. Sorry about that. So going into white, their main strategy is kind of white weenie, as it often is. Enduring Innocence can draw cards off of creatures entering. You have Mother of Runes and Giver of Runes. You have Guide of Souls, a Johnny. You have Thraben Inspector. There's all sorts of small little creatures you can get in with. Adeline is a great payoff for having lots of little white creatures. And then, of course, white also has some of the better removal. It has Swords to Plowshares and also Paths to Exile. Wrath of God is the only Wrath in white other than Sunfall. So white has two Wraths, Wrath of God and Sunfall. There's no Day of Judgment, nothing else. And then lastly, Parallax Wave is in this cube. I did not know that card was on Arena, but I think I undervalue it and how good it is. It removes 3 or 4 creatures for a turn or two. And Containment Priest is in this cube, which is a nice combo with Parallax Wave. So I think I underrate it. So take it highly if you're in a white strategy. But this is what white is trying to get up to. And then the last card on this slide I have not talked about is Stoneforge Mystic. So let's talk about Stoneforge packages. So Stoneforge Mystic lets you tutor in equipment and then put it into play. In my opinion, to play Stoneforge Mystic, you want at least one equipment that turns into a creature. Both Cauldron Complete and Batterskull are in the set. So I would want one of those to go with my Stoneforge Mystic. Additionally, I would want 1 or 2 value equipments. So different value equipments that are in this cube: Shadow Spear, Skull Clamp, Umezawa's Jitte, Sword of Fire and Ice is also in the cube. So among those 4, I would want 1, and I would also want 1 creature, and then I would want a third. So, you know, one of those, there's some equipments I haven't talked about yet, but you want to be able to have a bit of a package where, you know, if you're ahead and you just need to beat them down, you know, go get a Cauldron Complete and start attacking on turn 3. If the game's a little more controlling, you just need to get a Skull Clamp and start drawing cards. You just want to make sure that you have a package, and also you don't want to be dead if you draw your Cauldron Complete and then you play Stoneforge and can't find anything. I would not register Stoneforge in a deck without 3 equipment, so keep that in mind. There are a few more equipment that are less generically good that I think are worth talking about. So both Lava Spur Boots and Lightning Greaves are in the cube. Both of these are fine, but they're better when paired with either Show and Telling things into play or Nadu, which we'll get to later. Nettle Cyst is great if you're an artifact deck. This is probably one of the better things to find if you're playing artifacts. And then lastly, Corey Steelcutter is in the cube. So if you're playing some red-white aggro deck where you're going to be casting a lot of spells, or if you're playing Jeskai with cantrips and all sorts of stuff, Corey Steelcutter can be an excellent find. Just if you're doing Stoneforge Corey Steelcutter, make sure that you're making sure you can trigger the cutter and get the value that you need. So that is kind of the different options for Stoneforge. Make sure you're getting at least 3 targets if you draft Stoneforge. Another little sub strategy that white has is Flicker. Felia, Ephemerate, and Flicker Wisp are all in the cube. Blade Splicer is in it, so they obviously just want you doing the Ephemerate Blade Splicer thing. And then they also have the Modern Horizons Evoke Elementals, and they have the Overlords. So if you Felia, Flicker, and Overlord, that's a modern strategy. It'll be good in cube. So if you're drafting these cards, make sure to look out for payoffs. White has all of the ways to flicker, but all colors have things that are worth flickering. So this is kind of the sub-theme I was able to find out of White. There's no life gain sub-theme, other different minor strategies. So make sure if you're doing the flicker thing to get probably the Evoke Elementals is the best thing to be doing. Moving on to blue. Blue has pieces of power, unlike other colors. So Recall and Time Walk are obviously both insanely good. Draft them very, very highly. I would take Time Walk over Mox Emerald, not over the other Moxen. And then Recall I would take over maybe all of the Moxen. I'd have to think about it. But yeah, blue is powerful. Time Twister, we will talk about later. It is not generically good because it gives your opponents cards, so you need to make sure that you're capitalizing more than your opponent would be. But blue, obviously, is just chock full of counter magic. I have tried to rank the different counter spells just based on my experience with Vintage Cube. I don't know how this format's going to be, but Mana Drain is obviously very, very good, lets you cast big things. I value Daze over Force of Will because Daze, you don't go down cards. You kind of go up a card or stay neutral because you're getting an island back to hand. Force of Will always causes you to go down a card. We will see how fast of a format this ends up being. If it's a turn or two slower than Vintage Cube, Daze might go down in value. But for now, I have it above Force of Will, and then Spell Pierce is just great because leaving open one blue is so easy, and there are so many non-creatures running around. And then kind of in the second tier, Counterspell, Force of Negation, Memory Lapse, and Mana Leak, they're all good. And all of them do their job great. They're just not my preferred counterspells. So that is blue's main strategy, just doing blue things. Another card that's in blue that you need to build around, just like Stoneforge needs to be built around, is Tinker. So Tinker's in the cube. If you haven't played with Tinker, it's just a great win condition, great way to cheat something in early and win the game. So the different targets for Tinker are kind of just these 6. Notably, there's no Blightsteel Colossus, which people who play Vintage Cube on Magic Online, that is probably the best target. I made a video about how good that card is, which I will link in the description. But if you draft Tinker, you want to make sure to have at least 2 of these in case you draw one of them. So my top tier is Portal and the 2 Titans. My second tier is Bolus's Citadel, but that will go up if you're playing a blue-black deck, because then you could just cast it. And then kind of in the bottom tier is Cauldron Complete and Myr Battlesphere. It's not really where you want to be, but if, let's say, you have Portal to Phyrexia and Myr Battlesphere as your 2 Tinker targets, I would be fine still playing the Tinker package. Also make sure that you play small artifacts, which there are tons of, so that will not be a problem. Another build-around card in blue is Flash, and this is more about that video. I made a video talking about all of the different big stupid idiots cheat into play that I'm linking in the description. But a lot of those are in this cube. So if you want a more in-depth analysis, go watch that. But Flash is great. You get an enters trigger and a dies trigger. And there are lots of creatures that are good with that in this cube. Any 2 or 3 of these I'd be happy with playing, even if they're all in the bottom tier, because even those are super good. But the best ones, in my opinion, are Woodfall Primus, Torsten, and Worldspine Worm, because they all leave creatures in play, and the ones that don't leave 15 power worth of creatures in play also have other good upside. Vaultborn Tyrant is probably the best on the second tier, maybe Atraxa. And then on the bottom tier, Archon, Atali, and Sundering Titan are all also just great things to be doing. So look out for Flash, and then look out for the targets. Like I mentioned earlier, Flash is not going to be in every pod. So don't draft these creatures hoping Flash comes. Flash might not come. Another card to build around in blue is Upheaval. Now, I've always thought Upheaval is very interesting because it's good when you have good cards. If you're just playing a super fair game, Upheaval isn't that good at all. But if you're able to generate a ton of mana and then put everything back in play, that's really the strategy you're going for. So the more broken cards you have, the better it gets. So I've always thought of it kind of as a win more card, but I threw some cards up here that are very good with Upheaval. Obviously, the 0 and 1 cost artifacts that generate mana. Fast Bond is good because you can float a green, play Fast Bond, replay out all your lands. Gaia's Cradle can generate tons of green mana. Mana Dorks can pay themselves back. So you tap birds for green, bounce it, and then you play the birds back with the green it made. And then Rafellos can also generate a ton of green mana. So Upheaval's best in a blue-green deck, but it's also just best when you're already playing good cards. So be wary if you draft this. Have a plan. Don't just draft it for value because it is not just value. So Blue's sub-theme is artifacts. As I talked about earlier, red and white don't contribute too much to the artifacts as they do in Vintage Cube. So in the Powered Cube, Tolarian Academy and Mishra's Workshop are both around. I should have put Mishra's Workshop on the land page. I count it as half a land or a quarter of a land. It can't cast all your spells, and that's a problem, but it's super good when you're trying to cast your artifacts. So both of those are hanging around. These are the decks where Mana Vault and Grim Monolith shine the most. I don't love them as cards, and I often don't draft them, but in artifact decks, they are super good. Tinker and Urza Lord High Artificer are good win cons in these kinds of decks, as well as Kappa Cannoneer, especially if you have tons of little artifacts. The big things to be casting, as we've talked about, Titan, Portal, other Titan, and then Nettlecyst can just be a huge beater. Urza Saga is in the cube, as is Karn. That makes the Karnstructs. So if you want to be doing Karnstructs, that's a good thing to do. But if you're building artifacts, I would recommend being in blue. So yeah, moving kind of adjacent, Coveted Jewel is in the cube, and so is Displacer Kitten. Both of these cards are good on their own, but together they combo and have you win the game as long as you're able to cast non-creature spells semi-consistently after drawing 3 cards. So look out for this little combo, and also both of these cards are just on their own pretty good. So moving on to white and blue, since we've talked about both of those. White blue is the multicolor pair that is the most fleshed out. There are not too many multicolor cards. I think each color gets 3 or 4 of them, but all of the ones in white blue are these control-y cards. So white blue is the control color. All 3 Wraths that are in white and blue are on the board, are on the screen right now. Those being Wrath of God, Balance, and Sunfall. If you're playing control, you want 2 of these. You know, no question. There's also swords. There's path. There's draw spells. There's all sorts of different things to be doing. If you want to play this strategy, get removal spells, counter spells, draw spells, and then the cards on screen here. So that is what white blue is trying to get up to, and the theme is pretty strong with all of the Azorius cards. So moving on to black, these are kind of the generically good cards, some discard and some removal. You know, it's really what black is known to be getting up to. Demonic Tutors in the cube, Vampiric Tutors in the cube, no Imperial Seal, but I don't think anyone's, really missing that too much. Black has Toxic Deluge, so that is the last Wrath. For those that haven't played with it, it's very good. Just make sure you're not killing yourself by casting it. Grief is great. It's something good to flicker. It's something good to reanimate, which we'll get to. And then Shieldred is one of the best things to be doing for 4 mana in these high power cubes, because so often your opponent is drawing more cards than they should, and more often than not, your opponent is not playing enough removal. So value removal pretty highly. Dark Ritual is one of the best accelerants in Cube and just in the game. I pack one, pick one Dark Ritual pretty often. Just Dark Ritualing into a Shieldred on 2 is super good. So these are kind of the generically good black cards. And obviously, Black's theme is Reanimator. So Entomb is in the cube. That is the best card in Reanimator. It always has been, and it probably always will be. It's important to put your Archon of Cruelty into your graveyard consistently, and Entomb lets you do that. The reanimation spells are Reanimate, Persist, Animate Dead, Unburial Rites, and Death. Make sure you're getting at least 4 of these if you're going to be all in on the reanimate strategy, or maybe 3 if you're doing a second strategy. As far as putting cards into the graveyard, Bone Shards, Overlord, Currency Converter, I think Collective Brutality is in the cube. We'll get to red, but red does a lot of discarding. Frantic Surge puts cards in the graveyard. Psychic Frog puts cards in the graveyard. If you're playing Reanimate, make sure you have a strategy on how you're going to put your big, stupid creatures into the graveyard. I recommend playing 2 or 3, maybe 2 that you can't cast and a Grave Titan or something like that. And then trying to get them out onto the battlefield in any of these ways. Now, if you're playing Reanimator, it's important to think about the anti-graveyard cards that are in the cube, and I could only find 4. Soul Cauldron can exile a creature from either player's graveyard. Containment Priest is probably your scariest card. It just says creatures can't come in from the graveyard, so watch out for Containment Priest. Endurance is in green, so if your opponent's mono green, just after game 1, they could side this in, or they could main deck it. It's a fine creature. And then Soul Guide Lantern, I would be playing Soul Guide Lantern in any Urza Saga package, any artifact deck. It is great graveyard hate and also just cycles. So watch out for these cards. But these are kind of the only 4 cards that are going to be touching your graveyard, which I feel like is less than normal. So Reanimator seems like a very viable strategy. Last card I want to talk about in black is Booster Tutor. Wizards has been very excited about spoiling this card. I don't know how good it's going to be. You get to open a magic pack and then put one of those cards into your hand. I thought about it a lot, and I think it's going to be bad. If you just think about all of the different sets that are on Arena, what's the most powerful one? Modern Horizons 3, probably. So if it lets you open Modern Horizons 3, you'll get the best card in your color out of an MH3 pack. Okay, like you're playing Vintage Cube. You know, your opponent could have Dark Ritual and Ancestral Recall and all sorts of stupid stuff in their hand. You know, how good is Writhing Chrysalis against, you know, Ancestral Recall or Counterspell or Mana Drain, you know? So I'm excited to see what packs you get to open, but I've decided I'm low on Booster Tutor. So take this card cautiously. It's fun, and I will be drafting it and playing it, but be wary that you probably will not be getting a card that is on the power level of the cube. Moving into red, no surprise to anyone, red's main strategy is burn you out and kill you quickly. Broadside Bombardiers made it in, as well as Gut. Those are my 2 favorite cards in burn. They both just kill your opponent insanely quickly. Fiery Confluence and Fire Blast also both made it in. Those are the best spells in burn, in my opinion. They just deal so much damage. And then tons of 1-drops that are aggro. You have the Death Greeter's Champion. You have Lightning Bolt. Just lots of different ways to get in. And then on your top end, you have Glorybringer. You have Goldspan Dragon. You have Overlord. Lots of good ways to close out a game. Red aggro does seem really good. I would expect it to be drafted very heavily early on because it is easy enough to do and is inherently powerful. Red kind of has this discard sub-theme, which I haven't been able to figure out exactly how good it is. Inti and Evora seem like the payoffs, but 2 payoffs isn't exactly a ton, but there are a lot of ways to discard in red. These are the ones I found quickly. There's probably more. All of these are definitely in the cube, though. So watch out for that, especially if you're being Reanimator. Red seems like the best color to pair, whereas usually I would recommend blue. Um, so red discard seems interesting. I have won many Vintage Cube games with Evora, so do not undervalue this as a strategy. So just watch out for this in red. Red's best friend is white. There are a couple different red-white hybrid cards that just add to this aggro strategy. In Flage and in Comet, I'm excited to play Comet, but also the Ajani Goblin Bombardment combo is in the cube, and you pretty much just get to play Modern Energy without the energy. I think Amped Raptor and Discharge are both in the cube, but I would not recommend playing those. I would just kind of run it like this, and then just more 1 and 2 drop creatures, try to kill them dead. So that is what I would recommend doing in red. Over being mono red burn, I think this is a better strategy. Moving into green. Green has mana dorks and makes mana and does stupid things. Craterhoof Behemoth is in the cube and seems like green's best win con. Survival of the Fittest lets you turn any mana dorks into Craterhoof late in the game. If you've never played with Survival of the Fittest, it is extremely good. It's also good in Reanimator, lets you put creatures into your graveyard. So if you draft Survival of the Fittest, really think about what different lines you can take and how you're going to turn your creatures into better things the best way possible. Bristly Bill is insanely good. It's proven itself time and time again. And then there's Natural Order as well. Natural Order is a build around, which we will talk about soon. And then, all this is one thing, but Guy's Cradle is another. Guy's Cradle is super fun, super good. Play your mana dorks, play your Guy's Cradle, get up to 8 mana on turn 4 and win the game. The sub-strategy of green, to no one's surprise, is lands. There are 2 Crucible effects in this cube as opposed to 3. There's no walk-in closet. And then there are Wasteland and Strip Mine, as well as the full fleet of Fetch lands and Prismatic Vista and Fabled Passage. So there are many ways to put lands into the graveyard naturally and then play them back out. You have Exploration and Fastbond to get multiple land drops per turn, as well as Icetail Explorer. So lots of ways to get a couple land drops per turn. As far as land payoffs, the main one I could find was Titania. And that's really the only one I could find. Vintage Cube on Magic Online has 3 land payoffs. This one really only has 1. There's no 4-color Omnath, no Baloth. So get your Titania and build lands. If you have Titania, Sylvan Safekeeper and Zurin Orb are both in the cube. I would not play Zurin Orb even if I have Titania, because Zurin Orb just does nothing by itself, whereas Safekeeper has lots of different applications. I have a video up where I won the game just because I had a Safekeeper out and it gave all my stuff Shroud. So don't underrate that. And then there are plenty of landfall creatures that are just good. They're not full payoffs, but, Cobraing a couple times into a Bristly Bill, making a large board and getting in is a viable strategy. So that is what green is up to. Green also has Channel. These are the channel targets. These are all the good ones other than new Ugin Eye of the Storm. So if you draft Channel, look to grab 2 of these. In my opinion, Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger is the best one, followed by Portal to Phyrexia. I am wary about Emrakul in my channel decks. There have been so many times where I draw Channel or I draw Emrakul and I'm finally able to do the thing, but I'm at 12 life. If you're able to channel Emrakul, you win that game immediately, but costing 15 life is a ton of life, especially if you're kind of slow trying to set up a combo. So be a little wary about that. But if you're drafting Channel, draft a couple of these colorless bombs and do the good thing. As I mentioned, Natural Order is a build around. You just want mana dorks, and then you want to grab 2 or 3 of these guys. These are the targets. I couldn't find anything else worth doing. I guess there is Craterhoof Behemoth, but usually that's not what you're trying to natural order into, because you want a natural order on turn 3, and you won't have anything worth behemothing. So try to grab 2 of these, maybe 3 of these if you're doing natural order. Interestingly, all of these are insanely good flash targets. So it seems like natural order flash is an interesting overlap that I'd be interested in trying. So keep your eye out for that. Make sure you get a couple of these if you get natural order. And then the last card I want to talk about in green is Up the Beanstalk. This is not a card on Vintage Cube or Legacy Cube online. And this is a very good card. It just confuses me being in this cube. I don't know how to do good things with it. There's no leyline binding. You know, if I'm playing white, I can evoke Solitude. Okay, awesome. I drew a card off of evoking Solitude, but that's my only Solitude. So I don't know how we're kind of cheating the system to make Up the Beanstalk good. I think this card's a bit of a trap, but I will be trying it out. Currently, I'm low on this card, but I think it's an interesting inclusion that I wanted to talk about. So just be aware that it is around. Now, some generically good colorless cards. You have Wasteland and Strip Mine. Both of those are great. Library of Alexandria. I've kind of gotten off it in Vintage Cube on Magic Online because the format has become a little too fast to sit around and draw cards. However, I feel like the Powered Cube on Arena is going to be at least a full turn slower. So I would recommend drafting Library pretty highly. Ancient Tomb is great acceleration. I, again, would draft this highly and play it in any deck. Lotus Petal is good acceleration if you have a really, really good 3 mana play like Oko or Grist or just some value generating 3-drop. Smuggler's Copter, people joke, is the best card in Burn. That might be true. And then you have Field of the Dead and Urza's Saga as other value lands. Urza's Saga we will talk about. Field of the Dead in Vintage Cube, again, it's fallen out of my favor because, you know, on turn 6, let's say you ramped and somehow did good things. If on turn 6 you're making a 2-2 and on turn 7 making a 2-2 and that's your big strategy to win the game, that's not a good strategy to win the game. There's much more powerful things going on. You have to draft around Field of the Dead, make sure you have all sorts of different lands. Got to get it out there. It doesn't do anything until late. There's no scape shift to just give you 7 bodies. So I'm a little low on Field of the Dead, but again, this format is slower, likely. So I will be keeping my eye out for it and seeing if it's any good. So talking about Urza's Saga, to play Urza's Saga, you want to make sure you have some 0 or 1 mana artifact that taps for mana. So Soul Ring, one of the Moxen, Mana Crypt, something like that. You want to make sure you have a 0 or 1 mana artifact that is just kind of generically good. My go-to will be Shadow Spear. Shadow Spear is the most powerful, generically good thing to get off of Saga. It just lets you punch in with those constructs. It is just so good at what it does. And then you also want a 0 or 1 mana artifact that draws a card. I think the best one is Soul Guide Lantern, but there's Baubles, there's Aether Spellbomb, there's lots of different things to do. But if you're drafting Saga, have a plan. Have something that taps for mana because you don't want to go down in cards. And then, kind of like I recommend with Stoneforge Mystic and other things, have 3 targets at least. You don't want to have Saga pop and have nothing to go get. That feels terrible. So make sure you have 3 targets if you have Urza's Saga. If you do, it's one of the better cards to draft. So now we're just going to move on to some generically powerful multicolor cards. We already talked about Baby Teferi. Fire Covenant, for those who have never cast it, is insanely good. You pay 6-10 life, and you kill all of your opponent's creatures and keep all of your own creatures, and it's instant speed. Really, really powerful magic card. Simic gets all the good toys. They have Oko and Uro and Nadu, which we will talk about. Oko is probably the best card to cast on turn 2, being quote-unquote fair, you know, not reanimating or show and telling, but Oko will win you games if you play it. Wrenn and 6 is great with lands. Grist is great, just value making things and killing things. Lutri is a very important companion. If you've never played a cube with Lutri, its companion clause is that all of your non-land spells have different names. That is always the case in cube. Therefore, if you're playing a blue or a red deck, Lutri gets to be your companion for free. It's not a particularly powerful card, but it is a free card, so keep that in mind. Minskimbu is insanely powerful. It's a legacy level threat. It just puts power into play and draws cards, and you have to kill a planeswalker, so it's so difficult to deal with. Usually when you play a Minskimbu, you win that game. Lurrus is good. You can build a companion deck around it where you get all 1 and 2 drop little white weenies. I wouldn't recommend that. I would just play Lurrus as a value piece, but it is something you can do. And then Psychic Frog, the Bane of Modern, Bane of Legacy, lets you discard cards for Reanimator strategies, lets you draw cards, can get big. It's just super powerful. So watch out for all of these. I chose not to talk about every 2-color strategy, but these are just kind of the generically powerful cards that these are the cards that are powerful enough, probably other than Uro, that it would lean me into going 2 colors if I wasn't already. So look out for these. I talked about Nadu and Simic. Nadu is by itself good. You don't have to play it in a combo potential. It just protects your creatures, gives you value, and it's a 3/4 flyer for 4. All of that's great. But it's so easy to put a couple cards in that are good with it that you might as well. I mentioned with Stoneforge, but Lava Spur Boots and Lightning Greaves are both the best things to be doing with Nadu, specifically Lightning Greaves. You move them around to all your creatures, get 2 triggers per creature that you have, and you'll usually win the game. Also, outside of those equipment, Bristly Bill and Scythecat Club, these are both generically good cards, unlike Lava Spur Boots, for example. So I'd be playing these in my green decks anyway. But you play a land, you put a counter on something, you get a Nadu trigger. Nadu might put another land into play. You get to put a counter on something, get a Nadu trigger. So it kind of does that on its own. Even if it's not comboing like that, you still get a trigger a turn, and you're playing these cards that are already good. So if you draft Nadu, look out for these cards. And if you draft these cards, look out for Nadu. I have many times had a Bristly Bill Cub kind of build and left myself open in case I saw a Nadu, and then I saw a Nadu and was fine. So just look out for that. This is my slide about Storm. Storm is in this cube, and I think it's a trap. Maybe I'm just old school, but the only rituals are Dark Ritual, Seething Song. Manamorphose doesn't count. Lotus Petal doesn't count. You know, like, it's hard to go up in mana. There's 3 wheels. There's Memory Jar, which is like half a wheel. Like, it seems like it's not fully there. But the way the cube's made is they clearly want us to try. So Tendrils of Agony, I think, is by far the worst of the 2 Storm spells. Just try to Brain Freeze them out. Don't try to Tendrils. Yawgmoth's Will is in, and Underworld Breach is in. I think Storm is a trap, even though they gave us all of the pieces that they could for it. I think the best way to try to build Storm is to just put Breach and Lion's Eye Diamond and Brain Freeze into a deck. Those 3 cards combo and win. You Brain Freeze yourself a couple times with Lion's Eye Diamond, and then you Brain Freeze your opponent a couple times and you win. That's all you need. And I think because Storm so often you have to build your whole deck around it, clearly there are tons of cards here. I do not recommend trying to do that. Maybe throw Breach, Freeze, and LED in a deck as kind of a secondary win con. But I think Storm is a trap. Another strategy that you can have is wheels. There are 5 wheels, and there are 4 wheel payoffs. So Hull Breacher, Narset, and Leovold all don't let your opponent draw extra cards. Hull Breacher makes you treasures. The other ones just prevent the card draw. And then Shieldred does let your opponent draw the 7 cards, but they take 14 damage and probably die. And then there are 5 and exactly 5 wheels, that being Wheel of Fortune, Echo, Time Twister, Time Spiral, and Memory Jar. This is one of my favorite strategies to throw in. If I'm playing a blue deck, maybe I'm playing Flash, maybe I'm playing Control, maybe I'm playing Artifacts, throw in an Narset, throw in a Time Twister. Maybe it happens. If it does happen, you win. If it doesn't happen, all the cards are good enough on their own that you're not feeling bad. Final little multicolor combo. We got Sneak Attack and Show and Tell and Shelldock Isle. I like throwing Shelldock Isle into these decks. Notably, there is no Through the Breach, so don't wait around looking for it. It's not in this cube. And we've talked about all of these huge creatures already. So if you're doing the blue-red sneak and show thing, know that is something that can be happening. And don't wait on Through the Breach. I'd recommend playing lots of cantrips, Ponder, Consider, those types of things, setting up, and then going from there. I also have found a lot of success playing Corey Steelcutter in these decks because I'm playing so many cantrips, Cantrip, Corey Steelcutter, Cantrip, Darcy, you kind of have this little sub-aggro build, and then, on turn 6, you go Sneak Attack, Emrakul, and win the game. This is actually the last little combo that's going on. They have Dark Depths combo. They have Hexmage and Thespian Stage to go with it, and there's also a crop rotation hanging out. I don't think this is a particularly good thing to be doing. If you are doing it, I would want both Stage and Hexmage in my deck. They also have Rite of the Reliquary. So they are giving us the tools to do Dark Depths combo. I mentioned in the lands part that I do not count Dark Depths in my land count. But this is the last little combo that I could find. So those are all of the combos and all of the kind of build-arounds in the cube. So you can keep those in mind while you're drafting. Moving on to the lands, I'm just going to kind of run through these. The lands that are available, the fetch lands, all 10 of them, these are going to be super coveted. There are 10 of them, and there are tons of fetchable lands. So really try to get the fetch lands, specifically Wooded Foothills, Windswept Heath, and Arid Mesa, because Red and 6 and green land strategies are hanging around. Really try to value the green fetches. The original dual lands are all in the cube. These are all great, especially with fetch lands, so draft these highly. Just under those are the shock lands. All 10 are in. Get them with your fetch lands and make your mana good. All the triomes are in. I call them all triomes, even though half of them are not called triomes. These are fine. If you're in a 3-color deck, try to get the triome for your 3 colors. Get a fetch land, make your mana good. The surveil lands, all 10 surveil lands are in. Again, these are better with fetch lands. I like to have 1 surveil land per deck, because then if I have an off turn, I can just fetch surveil. And then the fast lands, all 10 fast lands have made it. On top of these, there's also Mana Confluence and Prismatic Vista and Fable Passage and some other assorted fixing. There's also there's a set of 10 man lands. They don't match. So some are from original Zendikar, some are from Kaladesh, some are from, Battle for Zendikar. They're all over the place. So there are also man lands. Draft those if you feel like you need them. But those are the lands you're working with. So to wrap it up, I'm very excited about this cube. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to draft. I will be making videos on this channel. I'm excited to get back into Arena, and I'm happy that they have finally made a real vintage power cube on Arena. In my opinion, the best strategies are either all-in aggro, which is red or red-white. After that, I like decks that are a combo deck and mid-range. So maybe playing just blue with some counter spells. I guess that's controlling. But then also just having flash in there. So you can win the game without doing the broken flash thing. But if you do that, you're doing well. Another example would be just, you know, playing mono red burn and then also having a sneak attack and an overlord and something else in there. And it's like, okay, like I'm probably going to burn you out, but I accidentally drew my 2-card combo and am winning the game now. My next favorite thing to do is kind of a double combo deck. An example of that would be Reanimator that also has Dark Depths combo. I draft that a lot in Vintage Cube. You're usually wanting to just do the Reanimator thing, but every once in a while you'll get someone with the Dark Depths, maybe one in every 5 games. You know, don't go all in on one combo. That's my least favorite kind of deck to build, and that's why I think Storm is a trap. If your whole deck is built around one combo and you draw the wrong, you know, combination of cards, you will lose on the spot. So I would not recommend doing that. But overall, have fun. Try to figure out different, you know, little mini synergies and make all sorts of different things. I will be drafting 5-color Golos. I'll be drafting artifacts, all sorts of different things. I'm excited about the Arena 7-win, 3-loss system. I think I'll be getting lots of 7-win runs. And yeah, thank you for watching if you made it this far. This video took me a very long time to make, getting all these images together, going through the entire card list on Magic Online. So if you somehow made it this far, please like the video. And if you're interested in seeing some gameplay, feel free to subscribe. Also, if you have questions for me or want to know my opinions on the draft order of different cards, leave a comment. I will be responding to them. And I'm excited for the cube. So thank you for watching.